This video presentation of the Healthcare Real Estate Summit is brought to you by the law firm of Bose, McKinney & Evans, LLP. Whether your real estate needs involve the purchase or sale of property, borrowing or lending of money, or development, construction, litigation, leasing, or management, the attorneys of Bose, McKinney & Evans have the knowledge and experience to help structure the project, negotiate the deal, and close the transaction. Bose means business.
Thank you again for this opportunity to participate on this panel today, and hopefully we all get some great benefits from this today. Again, my name is Joel Farmer. I'm with American Structure Point. I am the healthcare director for that organization, and very happy to be here today.
Hi, my name is Chris McCracken. I'm with Meyer & Agent Construction. I've been with Meyer & Agent for about 20 years, been in the industry for about 25 years. I'm executive vice president and partner with Meyer & Agent, and then also been working with Anthony and Carl for all of the healthcare projects for Meyer & Agent, and lead as our healthcare director for Meyer & Agent.
My name is Andrew Dick. I'm a shareholder with Hall Render. We are a healthcare law firm, and I primarily represent hospitals and healthcare providers on new development projects around the country.
My name is Ross Goyer. I'm with Cornerstone Companies. I've been in healthcare real estate for about 20 years. I handle development projects for them, do some leasing, and still dabble a little bit in property management as well, so touch all three of the major disciplines in our business.
I'm Phil Kenny, president of Wilhelm Construction, and thank you for allowing us to be the sponsor today. And Connie, you mentioned Phil Donahue. My guess is about half the crowd here is not old enough to know who that is, which means it's great to see all the young people here. I think that means a lot to our industry, and it's good to just see you active. So stay active because you just make our industry better.
And good morning. My name is Matt Love. I'm the CEO at Options Behavioral Health. We're a small 84-bed psychiatric facility on 56th Street, right across from Lawrence Central High School, and I'll be your moderator today. So earlier we were talking a little bit, Chris, and you had mentioned really what's the next model for healthcare construction?
Yeah, so as I've grown up pre-Donahue era, we start looking at what the trends are and what the healthcare sector has been building. We started seeing emergency room renovations, getting the front door of the hospitals open. Then we started seeing the patient room renovations, getting them down to a single bed patient room. And then a lot of oncology work over the last 10 years. And then more recently, I'd say over the last 3 to 5 years, we're seeing across the Midwest and then down the Southeast region, a lot of the 23-hour stays, the boutique type shops, more of an MOB type setting with a radiology component, but as well as the non-invasive surgical components. You can go in, get your procedure done. You're there. You can be shifted over if you need a radiology session, and then you're out the door. And then the next phase is these groups are partnering with the inpatient hospital side as well. So that's what we've been seeing.
I think that we've been talking about kind of more of a retail flavor coming to healthcare for most of the last 20 years. Do we think that's accelerating? Is that really more of a trend now? I mean, I certainly think that that's the case. It seems like we've dabbled in it for most of the last 2 decades, but now it seems like it's a really strong and real trend in what we're doing.
I think that is the case. Most of the clients that have been coming to us recently are asking about the retail healthcare concept. How do you get the consumer into the facility? Ease of getting into the facility, a destination type place. For instance, being able to, like Chris was saying, having your physicians at one location, having an imaging center at one location, having lab work, and then being able to do a one-stop shop kind of scenario is in an outpatient setting. We're seeing a lot more of the outpatient care centers popping up all over in the communities, trying to make healthcare more of a community-oriented service versus going to what we call the mothership of a facility, and getting healthcare out into the communities versus going to one central location.
I think that's right. The buzzword that I see around the country, we're calling these ambulatory care centers, and I think you guys hit the nail on the head. We're going to have a physician office component. We're going to have lab, imaging, maybe some what we call timeshare clinic space where we can rotate specialists out of the space. We're just driving some of those services that were ordinarily provided in the inpatient. For example, like a Methodist, you'd go to Methodist to get your MRI. We're trying to push a lot of those services out, making it more convenient. But what we're seeing is smaller facilities. And I think Ross and I were talking about that earlier today. Before it used to be, well, I want to build a 60,000 square foot medical office building just for physicians. We still see some of that, but just not as much. There's more variety of what's going on in the space, and we want to drive some of those services at a more convenient location, whether it's lab or imaging or other diagnostic services.
Yeah, and I think the second panel will probably spend more time on this, but certainly that creates challenges from a design and from a cost standpoint, and certainly from an ownership standpoint and a landlord standpoint. I mean, 10 years ago, we had a $3 to $5 premium on medical office space all day long, and nobody questioned it. It just was what it was. Well, now you're competing with the retail strip center down the street. You're competing with the office building that's got 3 or 4 healthcare uses in it. So, and because of that willingness of the systems to branch out and have more of a retail feel, we've certainly seen that premium on the medical office space dwindle, and which creates a lot of challenges, and for this panel in particular, it creates challenges on design and construction, because obviously narrowing that cost gap is important to us.
Well, the other aspect of the retail healthcare is, for a lot of our clients, is also competing with the true retail healthcare, which is the Walmarts, the Walgreens, those components where they're doing that quick in, quick out urgent care. My personal take on that is, if I have a cold or something like that, I'm fine going to a facility like that to see a nurse and get a prescription. But if I have a true medical condition, you want to go to a facility that is backed by a healthcare group that that you're going to be able to get the right care and push on and if need be, go to a larger facility that can take care of your needs.
And we see the same trends both locally and nationally. And as a consumer of healthcare and a father of 5, I hope they continue to bring more services out to the neighborhoods and local areas. It's a lot simpler on families, I think, to get those services.
Another interesting thing I was going to ask you all, what do the ownership models look like now, as far as the folks that are asking for the construction, asking for the building?
I have a number of clients that have an appetite for owning the project, whether it's outpatient space or medical office space, whereas I have quite a few that are still doing off-balance sheet deals, dealing with guys like TAG or Keith, partnering with a developer. That's still hot in my mind. We're seeing some different models as well, and maybe the next group can talk a little bit about this. We're seeing credit tenant leases, partnering with developers which is just an alternative financing structure where the occupant will own the project at the end of the life of the lease. I still see a variety, so I don't know what you guys are seeing.
We'd see the same thing. I don't think there is clearly a one-size-fits-all or one way to do things. It's a wide variety, and each health group has a different way of constructing and owning these facilities.
Good. I'd like to go back and talk. You mentioned, the mothership hospitals. Obviously, as you push more services out into the community, that creates some challenges for these mothership hospitals. And certainly, there's huge amounts of medical office space connected to or very close to these hospitals. From a design construction perspective, how do we continue to make that product viable in the market? I mean, obviously, a lot of those MOBs were positioned so that they're maybe not the main entrance to the hospital, but they're certainly a primary entrance. if that building's half empty, that's a problem for the mothership. So how, from a design construction standpoint, do we address that going forward?
Yeah, and not only is that tend to be a problem, but you also see the shift from inpatient to outpatient services. So all these rooms that were constructed to house the inpatient services are no longer, being needed. So the transformation to outpatient services is also a concern, of the larger facilities.
And I was talking to an administrator the other day, and one of their key aspects is retaining their doctors. And when they've got the mothership, the second mothership or third, depending on which group we're talking about in the state here, down the street, and they've got a brand new building, brand new facilities, looking for that doctor to go to, they have to up the ante and give them the facility and the tools and rooms and stuff that they can use to keep them retained. I think that's true with any employee, but especially with the doctors in the hospital too.
I think the on-campus medical office space, we talk about pushing services out into the retail sector, but it is more as the healthcare environment changes, the more it stays the same. In my world, I'm almost always on the hospital side. On-campus medical office space is still, there's still demand for that and a strong desire for that, especially in urban areas where we have large hospitals that are admitting a lot of patients. That's still attractive space. From the physician side, it comes down to cost. How much are we willing to pay for that on-campus premium? It's always about the price. Sure, they want a nice building, but particularly if they're an independent group, it's all about price. And even if they're an employed group, it's still about price because it can affect their bonus structure or how they're paid. But it's a challenge, Ross, because some of that space is aging. And how do you keep the price competitive when it's space that's maybe not as attractive? I don't have the answer, but the hospitals have to be creative. And if they monetize those buildings, the developers have to be, or the investor groups have to be creative as well to try to lure tenants into the space or to retain them. And maybe the next panel can talk a little bit about that as well.
I know that you all also mentioned that finding enough qualified people to build has been a challenge as well. Would you all like to discuss that?
But that's a huge deal for our industry. That there's no doubt where we have labor shortages, and it's not just the craftspeople building the buildings. It's the people that do on the administrative side of things. And I mentioned to somebody before we started here that what we're seeing is we might be able to get enough bodies, but they might be C&D players, to put it, that maybe they might show up 4 out of 5 days, something like that. But we're definitely seeing it both here locally in Indianapolis, in our state, and from what I gather from other contractors, that it's a national problem.
Yeah, we're currently working in the southeast region as well as in the state, and the quantity of workers that we're getting is about 50% of what we saw 6-7 years ago, and out of that 50%, about 10% actually know what's going on, we joke about it, but it really puts a hardship on managing the projects. And from the specialty of healthcare, when you look at the, especially if you get into the occupied renovations or the specialty surgical rooms or radiology, you want contractors, and you want the people that work for those contractors to know what they're doing and have the experience. And we find that management level across the board is skyrocketed. We have to watch everybody every second of the time, because if you turn your back for a minute, something's going wrong, people aren't showing up, something's installed wrong. So it's definitely across the nation for that.
And the problem we'll see is eventually you're going to see just wages go up faster, which means projects are going to cost more and they're going to take longer to build. So that's the side effect of what we're seeing.
Another interesting topic that we discussed the other day was the upcoming Supreme Court ruling on the Affordable Care Act. I was wondering if you gentlemen had some opinions on how that might affect healthcare construction.
As the lone attorney here,
I set that one up just for you.
but keep in mind, I'm a real estate guy at a healthcare firm, but I don't think we're anticipating any significant changes. The impact of the Affordable Care Act has been set in motion years ago. The way that healthcare is provided and the way that it's going to be paid for through Medicare and Medicaid has changed and will continue to change. The bottom line is we're spending a fortune when you look at our national budget on healthcare cost. And we've got to provide it more efficiently, we've got to do it better, we've got to provide more quality. And those are the metrics that the federal government's looking at when they provide care. And we know that reimbursement may have a slight uptick in the Medicare and Medicaid space, but the cost increases can't continue. And so regardless, in my opinion, of what happens, the way that care is paid for through what traditionally has been a fee-for-service model is going to change, and it's going to be based on quality. It's going to be based on is this patient returning to the hospital or to the physician multiple times without good results? And there's going to be an incentive to provide good results. That's my take on it. So it is regardless of how this decision plays out, and there's always a lot of chatter about Congress trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act, the bottom line is things are changing. And they're going to have to change because there's too much money at stake and we can't afford to spend as much as we've been spending, and the increases cannot continue to escalate as they have been.
I think another aspect of affordable care that you mentioned in terms of the performance and the quality of care is as these systems continue to expand out and do more work in smaller areas and from smaller facilities, how is the care quality maintained across that broader geographic, smaller locations, more locations? It's much more difficult to ensure. So, as an example, you go into the hospital, you have a minor procedure done, it doesn't feel right 2 days later, you go to the local facility because it's close, and that doctor misdiagnoses, put some cream on it and a Band-Aid, and then a week later you've got a massive infection and you're back in the hospital 5 days on IV antibiotics. Well, where's the responsibility? How is that break, if you will, in the care handled, and what impact does that have on how we design, build, lease, and then ultimately the hospital system staff and manage those outlying facilities? It's a big question.
I think it's tracking the patients. Over the years we've seen electronic medical records be put into place. That's changing things. Telehealth is going to change things and probably have an impact on maybe more rural facilities and how they build those rural facilities. They may not need as much clinical space or physician office space if telehealth is going to be put into place and embraced. Right now, there's still a question about how providers are going to get paid for using those type of devices. So I think that's going to be a change that impacts construction. We're seeing it right now, where rural facilities are trying to partner with larger facilities in urban areas to get that specialist to either come down there or to participate through a telehealth device. And there are struggles with legal issues associated with implementing those type of programs. But it's also going to affect real estate. But I don't know that it's going to affect it significantly. I would just say maybe some of the rural setting, they may not need as much physician office space if they can rotate specialists out of it, or if they can have a dedicated space for telehealth.
I read one article about a telehealth space facility built. It's either Kansas City or St. Louis. I'm not sure which. Have you guys seen any construction calls for either space or entire facilities designed for that type of use?
Yes, we have. Primarily in the VA system, we see a lot of telehealth because in the VA system, they're setting up a lot of the outpatient clinics all over in the communities, and they don't have the ability or the manpower to have specialists at every single location. So we are setting up dedicated rooms and spaces that support that telehealth so that they can get that specialty care that one-on-one that they need. And it's not so much a reimbursable issue on the VA side, but I can see the issue for a rural health system where they have the affiliation and are doing that. And speaking of what some of those rural health situations, the clients that we've been working with, we've found that they've actually had an increase in revenue with the current healthcare laws that are in place because there's more people out there that have healthcare that didn't have healthcare before, and so they're now coming in and seeking services where before they didn't, and so they are seeing an increase in capital cash flow coming through the system. The problem with those rural health facilities is their infrastructure is outdated. A lot of them are still from the 1950s, 1960s, and have had very little renovation work over the years, and so they're suffering. And with this influx of new patient load, they're trying to figure out how to implement changes to their facility that can keep up with this new demand that they have. And a lot of it is going to those alternative design solutions as far as doing lease-back options and stuff like that, because they can afford to make a payment, but they don't have the capital to actually do that initial,
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's access to capital unless they've partnered with a larger system like an IU Health or a St. Vincent in these areas. A lot of the rural facilities struggle. They don't have, they're not credit rated when it comes to issuing bonds. It's just harder to get capital and to get interest, particularly from a lot of developers as well, because they're smaller projects or from contractors that may not be big enough. They're in parts of the state that are harder to get to, harder to get manpower to. I think you're exactly right.
On the Affordable Care Act, I agree with your comments. That's a logical response, and I don't disagree, but I think depending on how the Supreme Court rules, something will happen. That there'll be, whether it affects the insurance companies, which affects families or something, it's one of those, the old saying, don't ever let a crisis go unused. Something will happen, I think, if they rule one way or the other.
Out of curiosity, with design and such of buildings, and me being a CEO, very interested in possibly building a building. No takers yet. Wanted to find out a little bit more about, and this is my personal question for you all. We haven't even discussed this one yet, but what do y'all think about design, and who do you bring in to help with the design and such? I mean, Joel, obviously with your newfound appreciation for sprinkler head placement, I think maybe you could talk a little bit on that and help me out from there.
Can you expand a little bit on your question?
Yeah, absolutely. When designing a new building, obviously there's a lot of things that I take in consideration when I'm working with our architects and such, as far as space utilization and cost effectiveness of that space. And wondering what your all's thoughts are, or what you've seen as far as trends on the design aspect.
Well, initially it's going to come down to that initial meeting with the client to find out exactly what their program is, what their needs are, what their requirements are, and what their vision is on what their mission is in that community and what they want to do. So the question is, it all depends. that answer is, it always depends. But typically the way we would handle it is we would sit down with the client, interview them, find out exactly what their needs are, what their wants are. There may be a situation where it's not really a building function that needs to be handled. It could be simply a way of how the operations of the facility are handled, and there may be a consult of that nature. But 9 times out of 10, it's really a building program that needs to be established. So one of the things that we can just do is get in there and talk to you and just find out exactly what your needs are and your wants, and determine what kind of delivery methods you want to impose. What kind of finances you have, what kind of budget, what kind of if there's a return on an investment desired. Obviously there typically is. Those kind of things. There's just a lot of questions that need to be asked to be able to facilitate, what you're looking for. And a lot of the things that we're doing these days is actually creating teams, not only with the design team, but with the developer or something like that, so that, or a construction group to try to have skin in the game for everybody that's there, and to make sure that you get the most bang for the buck for what you're looking to do.
And certainly, as someone that works on the development side as well, when I'm looking at my construction and architectural teams, I'm looking for exactly what Joel is talking about. I'm looking for somebody that's going to listen to me as the developer, the guy that's got skin in the game, and the hospital system that's going to anchor the building, and design something for us that works, that fits our numbers. I mean, you'd be surprised how often we still are working what I would call a moderately priced medical office building, and our initial architectural plans come out with, 2-story lobbies that are calling for marble floors and stuff that just doesn't fit the price model we're trying to hit. And that costs us time. It costs us money, of course. They're one and the same. So, being sensitive to each hospital system, where they are, what we're trying to achieve with this project, right out of the gate, that's what I'm looking for in design and construction.
Well, and it also lends back to just having a collaborative approach, that you really want all the information, all the players together, so that a decision can be made. And we always tell our clients there's always opportunity at the beginning of the project. There's more opportunity to do things at less risk. The dollars are you can define the dollars sooner. The further you get into a project, those opportunities kind of dwindle as far as they're there, but they cost more. And so if we can get all the decisions made up front, it just makes that whole process a lot easier.
I think on the design side that you have to make the building inviting. You have to make it very accessible. So I always promote building more parking garages, of course. But I think you need to, and my dad was an ophthalmologist, and my mom was an operating room nurse. So we were, even with that background, a hospital or a medical office building is a scary place for a kid. And you have to make it inviting to people to come in there, whether you're 8 or you're 80, and make it accessible. So I think we have to, in the design of these, I always say we can build whatever you can design, but we have to remember who we're designing these buildings for.
I do agree. I think we need to make these facilities a destination, not just a place we have to go, a place that we want to go. I think that's really key.
Matt, just to touch on that, as an outsider, as the lawyer involved in these deals, I've seen more emphasis placed on hiring qualified contractors and designers. That's huge because it's highly regulated space, whether it's hospital space. I mean, we have accreditation issues, we have licensure issues, we have certificate of need issues in some states. More emphasis on that, and to your point about efficiency of space, I've seen on one particular facility much more time spent on the design side to make the space as efficient as possible, and we're just seeing more and more time spent on things like that because they know that the space comes at a premium. It's so expensive to build, whether it's urgent care, whether it's surgery center space, it's just expensive space. So.
Well, Connie, with your permission, if you work that side of the room, I'll do this side of the room for questions and answers. Okay. So give me a second. And I guess probably the easiest way to do this, anyone have any questions on this side of the room that I might be able to? These gentlemen? Absolutely.
Hi, I wanted to follow up on your labor shortage and whether you attribute that to, it's not numbers, obviously, from a population perspective. So is it our education systems, or is it trades reaching out to individuals to come into their programming?
From what I've seen, we lost a lot of people in the downturn. They went and either retired or went and did something else. And again, that's either the crafts people or in our offices. And also, they're just not coming back to get into our industry in enough numbers to fill that void. Because when you think about it, it's not an easy job because you're working outside when it's 10 degrees or it's 9, like today. It's not but it is a great living. I told somebody else the other day, if you look at the W-2s we send out at the end of the year, there are a lot of the craftspeople that make well over $100,000 a year. Now that's working a lot of hours, but it is something you can have a good income with great benefits.
My name is Tag Burge, and I'm the president of Cornerstone Companies. Cornerstone is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year, and we are a fully integrated healthcare platform in that we do leasing, management, and development around the Midwest.
I am Keith Concoli. I'm with Duke Realty. We are also a fully integrated real estate operator, owner, and developer based here in Indianapolis. We have a national healthcare platform, and my responsibility is to oversee that platform.
Tom Ringham, I'm the Associate Vice President of Facilities at Eskenazi Health. I have responsibilities for all about 1.7 million square feet around the Marion County, both on the operations side, and then I also have responsibility for any capital projects that we do.
I'm Mark Bodie, one of the directors of real estate at IU Health's corporate real estate organization. I'm an architect by trade, but have been in the design, construction, and real estate industries my entire career.
Hello. That's much better. I'm Brant Wright. I'm a partner at Bose McKinney and Evans. I'm a chair of the healthcare group, and I'm also a partner in the real estate services group. I focus my practice on, I represent hospitals, physicians, and developers, so I have a little bit broader practice than some of the other folks out here. So with that, let's kick this off with, why don't we start out with Keith here. And Keith, what do you see the future of healthcare today in the real estate world? We're just open broad with the Affordable Care Act. What do you see in the trends?
Sure. The first panel touched on it. Clearly, there is a retailization within the healthcare delivery model. There's one of the things that we see most of the systems that we partner with are focused on is something called the continuum of care, and how care is delivered to patients really across their entire lifespan. So from the beginning of life till the end of life, and how each system historically has fit into where they've been able to deliver care historically and where they want to deliver care in the future. And then the real estate implications of that are, if you have been in the rehabilitation business before, but it's in your inpatient hospital and you want to take that out of your inpatient hospital and make it a freestanding facility, there are obviously real estate implications there. And then there's really different places across the continuum where there are real estate opportunities. So I think that the change, Brant, to get to it, is really taking a much more holistic approach to how healthcare is delivered to patients.
Yeah, if I may, the continuum of care to me means a couple things. Hospitals are today transitioning out of the sickness business into the wellness business. And what I mean by that is that we don't want the first interaction we have with a patient to be their presentation to the hospital. Instead, we want to see that first interaction be with a primary care physician out in their community. And so that means a couple things for us. It means that we are continuing to employ those primary care physicians rather than those being an independent physician. They're employed by our hospital system. So we continue to see that influx of integration activity. And then to get to the point about real estate, I suppose those physicians need a place to work. So you'll see us in the primary care marketplace looking to find locations for those new primary care outlets to be. You'll see us in the Plainfield marketplace with a recent such project. You'll see us downtown. You'll see us in Anson in the days to come, among other places. So that's what that continuum ultimately means to us with real estate.
And I would say for Eskenazi, since we had our kind of setup prep call, I've been thinking about this. The concept is something not new to us. We have some 32 properties around the community that have been positioned to get our customers into those locations away from the hospital. That doesn't always happen. We still have the busiest ED in the state, and largely because there's some inappropriate care going on for an ED. But we position that way largely to work to get folks away from the hospital, because our patients, there's a large percentage of our patients that didn't have an ability to pay. Well, guess what? Now they do, which means we also now have to change our mindset to make sure we keep attracting those folks as customers, because they can also walk down the street now to Methodist, where we would have been positioned maybe to be the only provider for an indigent care base, or the majority of the indigent care base. Now with an ability to pay, they can go other places. So presenting that market as was stated in the first panel in an open and inviting way has now become hugely important for us as well.
Tom, is that causing you guys to rethink the attractiveness of your facilities, or where they need to be located to capture that?
No, clearly my leaders had a vision when we built the new place that incorporated a lot of the things that were discussed in the first panel too. If you haven't been, it's an extremely attractive place. We pulled off something magical. It is one of those once in a lifetime opportunities. So that home base is still important to us. But at the same time, we were building our largest outpatient care facility on West 38th Street in Moeller, utilizing a developer, which was unusual for us as well. So that's a change for us. And if you go to that facility, you'll see a lot of the same concepts in terms of the openness, inviting, or one-stop shop. I mean, it's all of those things. It's about an 80,000 square foot facility. So it's a big primary care facility for us.
Tag, what are you seeing as the most attractive, most opportunities for a developer like you right now?
Yeah, the Affordable Care Act has definitely changed the whole paradigm in healthcare. We've moved from fee to service to fee per performance, and so that's driven in large part what we see in terms of the healthcare facilities. You know, in our world, Cornerstone's typically been an outpatient MOB developer. And the off-campus model is essentially where I think the world is moving to. We were with one of the healthcare leaders from the Sisters the other day, and his comment to me was, we're not in the hospital business anymore, we're in the outpatient business. And if you think about how the reimbursement has changed, where you've gone from fee for service, where you have an incentive to provide services in an expensive setting, to fee per performance, you want to get into a lower cost setting to deliver those services. And so everybody's touched on it today, and it's absolutely true that the outpatient system of delivery, which are smaller, typically more efficient buildings to build. The hospital is anywhere from $400 to $500 a foot, where MOB is about $200 a foot. So clearly, if you can build cheaper and provide a high level of care, and your reimbursement is capitated, well, then you have an incentive to move from the hospital to the outpatient setting. So 6 years ago, if you built on campus, you had a distinct premium in terms of the value of the building. Cap rate would be 150 basis points lower. And what we're seeing today is that the outpatient setting, cap rates have really compressed in recognition that the healthcare systems have to do the retail setting. And I'd say there's still a premium to being on campus, but that premium has probably been cut in half in the last 5 years.
Keith, where do you think we are in comparison to the other markets as far as getting out into the retail component?
Well, it's happening everywhere. There were some in Indianapolis. I would say there were some systems that were very forward-thinking with respect to moving their care into the neighborhoods and support. You know, Tom mentioned you guys have been doing that for an awful long time. There's other folks here as well who have been doing it, and it really is. It's not consistent across the country, at least where we're doing business. But there are places that are falling, that are everybody's catching up. You know, we're kind of ahead of the curve in my opinion. Places like Dallas, where we do a lot of we do a lot of work in Dallas. They're catching up. It's expanding as the population is expanding. We're pretty active in Denver right now, where systems are expanding into each other's territories and getting more competitive, where, we started that back before the Great Recession, and others are kind of just starting to do that now. It's to some extent, in my opinion, the coming to grips with the Affordable Care Act and understanding how the reimbursements are going to work have given people they're really at a point now where they feel, okay, now it's time that we've got to put our strategy in place that we've been talking about for an awful long time.
Mark, I'm just kind of curious. You're one of the few systems that are building a brand new hospital. You would talk a little bit about the thoughts on that and what drove the consolidation there?
I can, good question. When most people say good question, they're stalling because they don't know the answer. In this case, I'm stalling because I don't know the answer. We've had two acute care, adult hospitals downtown since the inception of Clarion and now IU Health with the change of name. Healthcare reform has certainly put pressure on that, economic pressure on that arrangement. We're looking at two hospitals, neither of which are full, and had a very difficult decision to work through. What do you do with that? I think having both ongoing was an unsustainable solution. So the decision, was, well, do you keep one in favor of the other, or do you get rid of both and do something new altogether? And after nearly a year of study, multi-variables and a very extensive list of constituents, why the answer was ultimately it makes sense to develop one of the existing facilities and enhance that, and that answer was Methodist. In terms of, so it's a bit of an anomaly, I guess. We're talking about outpatient focus and so forth, but at the same time, the economic pressures of affordable care makes this a reality for us to address at this time.
Mark, are you going to have more beds or less beds after you build your new hospital?
If I understand it correctly, it'll be less beds than the aggregate of the two, but it'll be more than what the Methodist campus holds today. So what you'll conceptually see is an expansion of that facility, but in the aggregate, what you're really looking at is a right sizing, if you will, of our adult downtown capacity.
But those economic pressures will continue in this retailization of healthcare as well. It's great to talk about remote radiology or labs, but there's a cost to that. I mean, I have 3 facilities with radiology rooms that are closed because that independent staffing is very difficult to do and very costly. And if we're really being driven to cost, it'll take some time for this to shake out too. It's a lot cheaper to pay a delivery service to run something to a central lab than it is to have a satellite lab. So our focus continues to be on that primary care provider and not so much on the components that support it. The components that support it from our model truly are going to wind up staying at the mothership because there's a huge expense and risk in those satellite facilities.
I'll echo what you're saying. That a lot of what we call retailization is primary care. And then we'll see there was some discussion about it earlier, a more regional center that will support a variety of different things. There may be a lab that's, and if you're thinking of Cincinnati, you may have a west side, you may have a downtown facility, and you may have a west side, a north side, an east side, and a south side kind of hub where you're providing, it's an ambulatory care facility that may have every different kind of service or specialist that you can have in it, and your primary cares are referring there, and then ultimately if they need to go to the mothership, as we've been calling it, then they'll get referred into the mothership. So it's a network of facilities that are supporting the primary care delivery system.
So sort of like the old airline system, right?
If I could speak to the network concept just for a moment, and we're talking about economics, another space that's driving us into is the urgent care market. As we think about how to most efficiently deliver buildings and then hopefully most efficiently have our patient base, partake of healthcare service, Tom had mentioned, having the busy ER, we would love to see those emergent but non-critical, non-life-threatening cases go to an urgent care setting rather than an emergency room setting. So it's taking us into that market space where we're looking at a series of locations around the central Indiana region whereby we would have urgent care as yet another way for that early presentation of the patient into our healthcare system, something that's cost effective for them, and then from our perspective, cost effective for us to deliver, and that those would be developer based leasehold solutions for us, as looking at someone like TAG or his peers in the marketplace, someone that does that day in and day out, knows how to deliver a building that can be cost competitive in the marketplace. Why, let's get into that setting for those kinds of solutions.
I was just going to say we're seeing that across the country as well, and some of the unique, some of the more forward-thinking, where it's possible, systems are. You'll walk into the facility and you'll either make a decision whether you go to an emergency room or you'll go to an urgent care. So you'll self-select, so to speak, depending upon the nature of your injury, or they will help you make the decision on which direction to go in an effort to help you control the cost. The patient, control the cost. Emergent care being much more costly than urgent care.
Tom, how's your the demand at your emergency department? Is it the same, less?
It is slightly less. One of the reasons for building the facility at 38th and Moeller was we truly just did a zip code study of who it was that was using our emergency department, and there was a large chunk of that population that we have other facilities that serve other areas, but there was nothing in this zone, and it really does feel like it took some load off. Now that some load means we're down from 125,000 visits a year to 120,000 visits a year, so it's still a very busy place.
One of the things I've seen, just because I happen to work on it, but I've seen the hospitals partnering with some non-traditional partners like health clubs and fitness facilities. Is that happening? In downtown Indianapolis, we have the YMCA and Franciscan Alliance. Are you seeing that across the country, Keith, or is that? What other partnerships, if any, are you seeing?
Yeah, it ties right into the comment how I started it. It's just another way, another place in the continuum of care. So there are a number of systems who are looking for partners to help them deliver services within those points in the continuum. So there are health club operators who are partnering with physicians. There is rehab hospital providers who are joint venturing with hospital systems. So yeah, those partnerships are happening in every different aspect of that. There's ER operators who are partnering with hospital systems to run their emergency departments, their freestanding emergency departments, as well as their in hospital emergency departments. So yeah, it's really there's a lot of different opportunities for joint ventures or partnerships.
Well, I think it goes back to Mark Bodie's comment about wellness. I mean, when you're in a world where you have a capitated or bundled payment and you're looking at population health, where you're trying to control cost, if you can move up the ladder rather down the ladder to a higher level of acuity and actually help at the top of that ladder and try to do preventative care to the wellness, to the YMCAs, you're going to score better and you're going to keep more of that reimbursement if you can keep those folks from moving down the ladder into a higher level of acuity in terms of their healthcare needs.
One of the other trends I've seen is that obviously the hospitals are acquiring physicians at a rapid rate. How is that changing investors on the outside world? Are you still having the doctors? Who's buying the property tag? What?
Well, if you think about healthcare real estate, there's really kind of two drivers. There's how the hospitals are reimbursed, because that will drive the facilities that they can afford to build. And the other, which you touched on, Brent, is the capital markets. The capital markets in healthcare real estate have fundamentally changed. In 2008, you could make an argument that healthcare real estate was not a core real estate asset, and that there were only 2 or 3 major REITs that really focused on healthcare. Post '08, folks realized that most of those buildings stayed pretty well occupied, unlike office buildings or retail, that there truly was no demand for some period of time. And so what has happened in the capital markets is you have a whole slew of new capital providers. There's probably not less than 10 or 12 active buyers around the country. You have new REITs, public listed REITs that have formed. You have a new public non-listed REITs, American Healthcare Real Estate, American Healthcare Investors, very active in this market. At the same time, you had the hospitals buying physicians and dealing with the Affordable Care Act. So there was a period for 4 or 5 years where the hospitals were trying to figure out their outpatient strategy, how to buy docs, how to deal with the Affordable Care Act, and there was really a dearth of new product. Same time, you had real estate, healthcare real estate become a core asset. All this new capital, primarily driven by Wall Street, coming to the market, but there's a whole slew of private equity and foreign buyers out there as well. And so really, we have kind of the perfect storm. I read something the other day that said, liquidity, 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 and nothing to drink. And I really thought that was how I felt about some of these cap rates and some of these buys that I'm seeing. You know, cap rates are lower than '06 pre-crisis levels for core real estate, healthcare real estate. And so as you're a developer, which we're a private developer, you're entering that dangerous period of time where the development yields are getting pushed down because the cap rates are getting pushed down. But how long does that last? And so it's a flood of liquidity, lack of new product, and cap rates that we've never seen before.
I would add to that, I think you said this early on in the presentation, or in the discussion, that it used to be a physician-owned, primarily a physician-occupied facility commanded a very different cap rate than a hospital-occupied facility. And while that still exists, the difference between those two is rapidly closing. And that's the same thing between an on-campus and off-campus. Off-campus facility affiliated with a hospital system, cap rates are not much different than an on-campus hospital-affiliated cap rate. So they are compressing.
Just to reiterate Keith's point, we had 250 physician partners in our portfolio that we sold in 2012. And so I was looking at some of those cap rates from 2012, and if you were a physician-owned medical office building, even on campus, your cap rate was, in 2012, about a 7.5 cap. And then we had some 100% leased to hospitals, AA credit, and those cap rates were about a 6.5 cap. To Keith's point, you could basically compress each of those by 100 basis points, and the delta would be maybe 25 basis points. So, you know, the flight to quality, which you saw after the recession, the Great Recession, is not there. There's so much liquidity that they're blurring the lines of the risk, and I don't see that trend changing anytime soon.
Foreign capital's coming in a big way too. I mean, I was talking to these guys at breakfast. We were working on a project in San Francisco, and the broker guided us that the exit cap rate in the disposition of that asset at some point in the future could be in the 2% range, because foreign capitals here, flight to quality, flight to safety. There is there's negative interest rates in other parts of the world. So if you can get a 2% return in a pretty solid asset, people will do it. It's a crazy time.
How small a deal will these guys look at? Are they 50,000 square foot buildings, 100,000 square foot buildings?
Well, that's kind of the last bastion of cap rate differential. So what we're seeing is that if you're a public company, you're not going to get your acquisition team on anything less than $20 million. If you're a public non-listed REIT and you've got $500 million to $1 billion, you might spend some time at $15 million. If you're private equity, which is going to have a higher cap rate because your cost of capital is higher because you're really a middleman for pension fund or a high net worth family, you can maybe get those folks to look at a $5 million level. So there is, for the smaller MOBs, the cap rates are higher only because the institutional capital is not flowing to those assets.
And from a development standpoint, at least from our perspective, and I suspect it's the same for TAG, we don't really have a size. We don't say a $10 million project is too small. For us, it's really all about the relationship with the hospital system. So if we have a relationship and they ask us to go do something that normally wouldn't be in the box, so to speak, but it's something that they need us to do, we'll do it, really from a development perspective and to some degree an acquisition as well. So it ties more to what our client's asking us to do necessarily than what we would say we'd rather do.
Mark, with these incredibly attractive cap rates, is we seeing the hospitals looking at liquidating any of their portfolio?
No, not really. We still have a strong philosophy of own our core assets and then lease our non-core, and that's a bit of a generic description, I suppose, but certainly any of our hospitals would be considered core assets, so we certainly own and intend to own all of those. We have a mixed bag when you look at significant on-campus MOBs. There are a few that we've never owned. For example, Methodist Professional Center 1 on the Methodist campus was originally a ground lease, and we've never owned that asset. And then to others that we monetized in the 2009-2010 timeframe, and then to others that we still own ourselves. So generally, I would say those on-campus assets, we're biased towards ownership these days.
Keith, is that true nationwide?
It's really hard to say because different systems have different philosophies. I did read a statistic the other day that of the hospital-controlled or occupied assets, only about 8% of those assets are owned by some group other than the hospital system, whether it's a pension fund or a REIT or a private developer. So there's a huge amount of opportunity in the healthcare real estate business for investors or developers because a lot of systems just feel exactly like you guys do. We want to control our core business, our core assets.
And I'm not the reimbursement guy with our organization by any means, but it still feels like there's a desire to fully understand how we can drive costs of these different arrangements through to that reimbursement, and still a huge amount of discomfort on where this is going to truly land. If we have a fully leased property, there's some ability to capture some of that lease rate in a reimbursement, but it's also then making that, there's an expense thing tied to this that I don't get, frankly. But I can tell my financial folks still aren't comfortable that they fully understand where ACA is going to really drive reimbursement and how we can recapture some of these costs. Right now, the comfort level I can tell is still own what we can own, bring the developer in. Just so that there's some comfort that we completely understand what we've got, honestly. I think if we did another major primary care facility, we would probably go to a developer, but we can't really tell how this comes back to us yet in some ways.
One thing I was going to say in terms of your question about hospital ownership, I see a little bit of distinction between the for-profit and the not-for-profit. We develop for CHS, which is the second largest for-profit hospital in the country, and they're based in Nashville, and their big competitor is HCA, which is the biggest, which is also based in Nashville. And HCA has made a decision that they're going to bring more of the development in-house, which is typically what you see as the cycle starts getting up here. People start seeing the exits and saying, well, hey, we need to bring this in-house. I was speaking to the CHS head of real estate yesterday, and he made the same comment to me. Well, we see the exits that the developers are having these days, and we're now considering bringing more of it in-house. So if you're a for-profit and you have the resources, and you don't need to otherwise deploy them, and there's liquidity everywhere, I could see more of the for-profit systems deciding to bring in some of the development in-house, develop it, put their employed physicians in there, and take advantage of the capital markets.
Let me go back to this other question. With the physicians being acquired by all the hospitals, is that changing the real estate market at all? Or you're just dealing with hospitals instead of physicians? Is that a good thing, bad thing?
Well, the credit's typically better when you have the hospital system on the lease versus the physicians on the lease. So that from the get-go. So as more physicians get employed and you again have more hospital credit, that's better. But many of our systems, for-profits and not-for-profits, the higher occupancy they have in the facility, the more likely they are to own the facility and it not be a developer facility. And I would also comment that it's regional. So depending upon where you're doing business across the country, the employment is at a totally different place. In Milwaukee, for example, we have a couple facilities, and the physician market, 95% of the physicians in that market are employed by one of the 3 primary systems in that market. The 5% of physicians who aren't employed are physicians who nobody wants to employ. Then if you move south, places like Tennessee, about 30% of the physicians are employed. So the model that you're working toward in Milwaukee is different than the model that you're working toward in many places in the South and the West as well. So you may end up with physician partners in your real estate in Phoenix, for example, that you wouldn't necessarily end up with in Michigan because of the different levels of physician employment. So it absolutely affects the real estate.
Even with the physician employment, are they allowing the employed physicians to have an ownership stake? Are you seeing any of that investing in a hospital asset, so to speak?
Well, I was going to go back to your first question and maybe touch on the next one. I mean, the physician employment model has fundamentally changed Cornerstone's business model. I mean, Cornerstone spent the first 20 years co-developing with physicians. When you had physicians, orthopedic surgeons making $2 million in the 1980s, which would be $4 million today, they had a lot of money to invest in facilities. Well, if you're not affiliated with a hospital surgery center, you're on a present value, most of the specialist compensation is down 50, 60%. So we're seeing less and less physicians that can invest in real estate. We've really spent the last 5 years selling physician MOBs. Keith touched on it earlier. We've sold $250 million of MOBs in the Midwest in the last 3 years, which candidly, 6 years ago wasn't even on our business plan. But what physicians realized, to Keith's point, is that, hey, these cap rates are now compressing, and not only are they compressing, they're basically on top of what a hospital credit would sell for. So you take the Hart MOB down in St. Francis, which was 100% St. Francis credit, that sold in 2012 at around a 7 cap. We now have another MOB, close proximity, not on campus, 100% physician owned, that's going to sell at a 675 cap. So the physicians have never seen these kind of cap rates, and I'm not sure the next generation, they're still independent physician groups. I mean, you got urologists and orthopedics that are still independent, but the younger physicians that are coming out, they have a lot more debt, they're not making the same money. So there's really had to have been a fundamental shift in our business from, we still do MOBs with physicians, but primarily it's all hospital driven.
I can touch on that briefly. I mean, IU Health had a couple of hospitals that were jointly hospital and physician owned. Our Avon and Carmel hospitals both fit that model. With healthcare reform, with Stark, anti-kickback, that was a difficult proposition. So those were both unwound and converted to full hospital ownership. The physician owners were, sold out their interest, and we converted those. Similarly, on the other end of the spectrum, our MOBs, being employed physicians for the most part, are wholly owned by the hospital as well. The only real, physician investment opportunity we have in our real estate play is in our outpatient surgery areas. We still do have a joint venture structure there where the hospital system, along with individual physicians, can invest in those locations. So, but otherwise, it's we've severed that that partnership concept with physicians.
That's pretty consistent. What we see, there are some, but there are fewer and fewer opportunities for employed physicians.
To make the surplus money. Tell me about, is there any unique issues when you acquire the physician groups with their current real estate holdings?
I can touch on that. No, I wouldn't say unique. For the most part, I mean, it's all about that physician and getting that particular specialty or that particular practice or their location, the coverage, whatever's driving it. You know, the real estate isn't the driver. We don't acquire that physician because we like their building. For the most part, and by that I mean I don't know that I've seen but one or two situations where a physician has owned the real estate that we've been absorbing. It's all been leasehold occupancy. So for us, it's almost perfunctory that we are going to take your space, we're going to take assignment of your lease, and we will step into your shoes in your leasehold obligation. So no real estate has never derailed an integration of a physician that we were looking to onboard.
I'd say we deal with this a lot because as the hospital acquire the physician group, then it's an awkward situation because the landlord is the physician partnership. Traditionally, the older physicians own more of that partnership, and then you've got now what was physician credit is hospital credit. And so we had a meeting last week about this issue, and so invariably what comes up is, okay, you still own this real estate, you've got 5 years left, this is your biggest asset, you're now employed by a system that can tell you to leave this building, and so that can lead to some awkward discussions, and typically what we try to get done is we try to extend the lease term and do a monetization and say, you know, you don't have control whether or not you will be a tenant, and if you leave this building, the building will be cut in half or have potentially no value depending on what market you're in.
Is that what you're seeing as well, Keith?
Yeah, I would say the same. It's identical, and it's usually one or two physician groups that have a facility that they've owned or they've built or converted a house over time, and they view it as a 6.5 cap medical office building, and it's got 3 years left on the lease, and there's no there's just no future for it. So it becomes a situation that you're just trying to help untangle for them.
I guess we're getting close on time, but so I'll give everyone a chance here to give their final comment here on what do you see as the biggest risk in commercial in the real estate world right now?
Interest rates.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have a different answer. It's interest rates.
Whatever they say.
Yeah, same here. I'll defer to the experts on that. Yeah.
Somebody talked about it on the first panel, this impending Supreme Court decision. I agree that healthcare has changed. So there will be if the decision comes down that the exchanges are illegal, which is really what the decision is about, it's going to cause a lot of chaos. But the fundamental way that real estate or that healthcare is being delivered has changed, and it's going to continue to be that way. So that does have potential to be an impact on us, but it'll be short term and it'll be chaotic for a while. But I think that's it.
Still cost driven of trying to reduce cost is the overlying drive. We ready to open to questions? I'm sure we've got some. I should have planted one. I see a question.
Let me get you on the microphone so they'll hear this on the video.
So you guys have talked about the real retailization of the new construction and the expense of on-campus real estate. So what is the future of the patient towers that are existing on campuses today?
I don't think they go away. I think you just see a sicker and sicker patient that stays in them. That was part of the design flexibility that we built into our new tower. That those rooms that are not critical care can become critical care with some renovation. We are still. I just ran the number because I got asked the question beforehand. We're running at about 85% occupancy of our total facility, but we're running about 95% occupancy of the beds we operate, and that's been the case for Eskenazi and Wishart in the past. That we are always full. And we have actually seen an uptick in our labor and delivery. So I don't think they go away. I think they just see a sicker and sicker patient. Now, that's at 340 beds. If I had 700 beds or 1,000 beds, I might feel differently.
Does anybody else have another question?
Can you see me okay? I'm standing. My question is, I understand that there's a lot of change in healthcare. It's more affordable, it's closer, more convenient, but are healthcare providers and healthcare insurance companies helping us to understand these changes and letting us know that we don't have to go to our primary doc to go to Walgreens? Are they helping us to understand that we can go to some of these clinics and before we go to a primary care physician, or do we have to go to our primary care physician before we show up at the hospital? Those kinds of things. I'm not sure that's being communicated to John Q. Public. And we haven't even talked about insurance companies, and maybe that's a whole other panel.
This is a personal opinion, not an Eskenazi opinion. I mean, I think the healthcare industry has historically been pretty crappy at communicating to the public. I think physicians in general aren't the best communicators to the public or to the patient. I mean, it depends who you've got. A specialist doesn't tend to be warm and fuzzy. But as a primary care provider of my wife's said to her once, do you really want the guy that's cutting on you to be warm and fuzzy, or do you want him to be clinical and get it done right? I think I know we are trying to get that message out and trying very hard to work those messages, but it's not something I don't think the entire industry's done very well in the past.
The only thing I would add to that is, healthcare is 18% of our economy and probably still growing. And I read an article recently about the effects of technology on transparency. If you go to each one of the major 3 systems, for a hip replacement, the cost variations are massive. And I think one of the big things that technology is going to disrupt in healthcare is transparency. None of us in this room know exactly what it costs to do any sort of procedure. None of us are probably doing value shopping, but as your deductibles go up, everybody's deductibles have gone up. I think you're going to see a real transparency wave with the technologies out there, and the consumer is going to become more educated, to your point.
And there's opportunities with technology to add a level of communication like we've never seen before. I don't think there's interest in it yet. I think there's still a lot of concern about liability, but there's opportunities for a particular message on a particular, a proportion of electronic medical record to all of a sudden be an email to a family member so that the message is consistent to a family member. So I think that will come.
It seems like most of the systems with any size to them are going through varying degrees of cost cutting, cost savings programs. And a lot of times the real estate function and the real estate decision-making process is getting revised, reworked, consolidated to a corporate level as a part of that. How do we as professional real estate people provide you guys with value in that new system, navigate it, understand it at a pretty high level?
Not sure if I can answer that. I mean, yes, we try to keep strategic control of real estate decisions within the organization. I certainly hear in the marketplace of real estate functions being outsourced. Some of our competitors have have done that, but still retain that core leadership internal. So I don't know that the decision-making process, changes radically in those arenas, but rather the execution process. So whether you're engaging that outsourced consultant or whether you're engaging us directly would be the only real change for me.
Can you guys talk just briefly about the impact of companies like Our Health and Activate Health, which in many instances are company-controlled or insurance-controlled primary care facilities, and if you've seen that as a growing impact or where you see that heading?
I can't. I'm sorry, I don't know those names. It's, so I can't. I don't, how do you, can you?
I know Our Health and I know their mission, and it's what we started the program with, which is about wellness rather than sickness. And every company that buys healthcare for their employees is trying to hold costs down, and I think you're going to see more of those kind of wellness-based programs where they take that holistic approach and track dietary needs and track your weight, how many steps, you're doing 10,000 steps a day. So as companies struggle with the cost of healthcare and are trying to contain those costs, I think you're going to see more of that private sector coming in and working to hold those premiums down so that the rate of increase for the company is not double digit.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't know what impact they're having on the systems and if they're reducing your primary care visits or if you guys are thinking about partnering with folks like that.
Not from our perspective.
No, I don't know. Not in the primary care. I mentioned our urgent care strategy earlier. That is a partnership that we are embarking on to bring expertise and management experience to the table there, but not in the primary care.
And it could be happening at a strategic level with some of my leaders, and I wouldn't know that, to be honest with you. But I would, Dr. Lisa Harris is our CEO. She's a primary care physician. Many of the things that we did with the design of our new facility were supported by her because of this whole wellness attitude. I mean, as I often say on the tours that I still give, when your CEO is a primary care physician, the wellness, that total coverage, that total care aspect, and the wellness side is something that is ingrained in what we are trying to do. I'm not sure we're doing it yet, but it's certainly there.
Along those lines, are you seeing any of the hospitals open wellness sites at large employers?
Yes, we do participate in that solution, business solutions, I think is what we call it. So we are actually helping various companies at their employment locations manage the wellness of their employee base. Yes.
And yes, we see it as well.
For more information on Bose McKinney & Evans, click on the firm logo.